Welcome to the Bible Forum. I'm Warren Sprouse. I want to talk to you about things that are moving forward in the world. Is the world moving forward? Apparently someone with the last name Woodhouse made headlines recently saying, "I hate his health plan," talking about President Obama's health plan. This was actually in the local Wilmington, North Carolina Star News. But it was back in September of 2009. And you might think, well, why is that significant? Well, it's significant because apparently the Star News quoted me. Now, I don't know if I ever knew this before or simply forgot it because I am old and decrepit. I got to believe that I did know it and that I told you about it. But that was 2009. Some of you weren't here then. I think it's a disaster, this person said, but it's better to refer to it as a socialist plan as opposed to saying he, Obama, is a socialist. They went on to say we need to stop the personal attacks and stick to the policy. This is appropriate because now we are gearing up for a new presidential election. And there's a multitude of people out there, and they're throwing barbs at people. And we don't like the personal attacks. We don't like a president who calls people names and that sort of thing. Well, the Star News in Wilmington, reporting these statements back then, ran the proverbial other side of the story, quoting a noted local pastor. Me. I had been on the radio in Wilmington every week for about 9 years at that point. They reported, quote, "Now even religious leaders have jumped into the fray." In August, Arizona pastor Stephen Anderson asked his parishioners to pray for Obama's death. Then they wrote, "That's where Pastor Warren Sprouse of Bible Baptist Church draws the line." Sprouse has a 3-hour weekly radio show hosted on the Big Talker at 93.5 and 106.7 FM called the Sunday Night Bible Forum. What Sprouse said, and I quote me, "I expect this coarseness to continue. There are few social controls left. You hear it in the preachers who rail against politicians in less than kind ways and with monstrous comparisons. Men who should know better, but are frightened at what they see." Now, due to the brevity of that statement, I'm assuming they edited whatever it was I said, because I'm a lot more wordy than that, but I can't remember what it was. But the reality here is that we've come a long way since the year 2009, and we have not headed in a good direction. It's been over 10 years since this event and the things surrounding it, and things have gotten actually worse. Obamacare, as it was called then and is being called now, was an effort at what is called socialism. Socialism, a euphemism hinting at the idea that it's a social plan, one instituted and maintained for the benefit of society. Now, unless you are about 4 years old, you know the reality. Socialism is a form of communism, communalism, a political idea which effectively makes the government your mother. The government doing for us what we are either not able to do or we are not willing to do. And the ultimate result being that the state takes over all our essential responsibilities, leaving us to enjoy our life free of care. Only we don't. The testimony of over 60 years in America and 100 years globally is that this communion actually enslaves people to their government. Now, on the other side, the Bible stands teaching us to accept personal responsibility. 1 Thessalonians chapter 3, verse 10, if a man won't work, neither should he eat. That's the Bible's instruction. It's like what parents do to their children when they either don't know how to parent or have warped and or parochial senses of parenthood. They do for people what those people should be doing for themselves. But in so doing, it does not make those little people any better. It makes them weaker and forever dependent upon the parent, or in this case, the government. Such a society takes no chances and makes no progress. There are no entrepreneurs, no courageous people who launch out to establish their own business or to improve their situation. They become content to let the government do it all for them. Do for them what God has said is their responsibility. The Bible is speaking of those who are disposed not to work, expecting others to take care of them. Such a person, the Bible tells us, should reap the rewards of their own choices, not as punishment, but as a lesson. He or she has refused to learn the life lesson of honest work. Of course, today parents are not teaching this, generally speaking, and other very important lessons of life. Parents today believe children are born with a sense of responsibility, diligence, and frugality. While they're young, they can be as irresponsible as they want, but they're just children. But when they grow up, they'll get it. They don't know that these lessons, these characteristics must be taught carefully, faithfully. Now, there are some who are born with the drive to succeed, to do for themselves. But a society built around the illogical idea that children will do fine with or without training, with or without external motivation, that children will continue, therefore, to produce and to reward indolence until there's nothing left but servitude to their masters. In our case, the government. And this is what the current Democrat Party is advocating. They call themselves Democratic. I am irritated no end. No matter where I read it, no matter where I hear it, it's always the Democratic Party. When I copy something for my script, I take the ick off. It's not ever been Democratic. They call themselves the Democrats. It's a Democrat Party. And the Democrat Party knows what's best for you. They will make your decisions for you, and they will reap the rewards that you produce. And they will continue until the society rises up against them. And unless you have a strong military, strong police force, society will rise up against them. But that'll be several generations down the road after we're all gone, right? And then it'll be their problem and not ours. Of course, there's no evidence in history that socialistic societies fare better than the so-called capitalists. China, Russia, Muslim countries, even Canada, which is moderately communistic, they call it socialism, meaning you have to wait 6 months to see your cancer doctor. But if you live near the U.S., people can slip across the border, get the medical care they need. They can also get the goods and the services that are either not available or only available to the wealthy or to the extremely patient in Canada. That's the way it works. We here have no experience with any of these things. Waiting in line to buy something is what you do at Christmas sales or New Year's Eve sales kinds of things. You stand in line to get the first of whatever. But in socialistic countries, you have to do that for pretty much everything. When I was on the radio in Wilmington, there was a fellow that would call in regularly, an older gentleman, and he would come into the studio, and sometimes he would sit in with some of the secular talk show hosts. I got to know him very well. He had an adult son who married a Brit, and the son stayed in Great Britain and lived there with her, and they raised their family there. And one day he told me how his son had come home, had come back to the United States. And I said, oh yeah, what, vacation? He says, no, surgery. What? Yeah, he had a need for surgery in Great Britain. He would have had to wait 6 months or thereabouts to have the surgery. In the meantime, he wasn't able to work. And he was in business for himself. So he had to shut the business down for 6 months until socialized medicine kicked in. He would have lost his business. So he came here. He got the surgery, and in a week or so, he went back home. I also talked to a lady in Canada who was a frequent caller to the show. She did the same thing. She found out that she had, I think it was cancer or something like that. And she got on an airplane and went to Michigan. She was going to have to wait 6 months just to get to a doctor to tell her whether she had a problem and what to do about it. And then after that, it would have been another 6 months or a year before she could have started any kind of therapies. That's what socialism does to you. Here in the United States, we have no experience with any of these things. And so we look at socialism, or at least some people do, with a kind of selfish eye. They say, oh yeah, that's wonderful, you don't have to pay for anything. And who wouldn't want the government to take care of them? Only the wise, perhaps, or the industrious, or the children of well-grounded parents, people with desire, purpose, self-respect. But we're not raising children like that anymore. We're raising dependent children, not independent children. Children who really don't know what it is to have to earn anything. Why do you require a child to cut the grass if they want money? You're teaching them a life lesson. You're not an ogre. You're helping the child. If all you do is give to the child, they don't learn the value of work. If all you do is take care of your children's problems, they don't learn problem-solving techniques. They never get hurt. They never have anybody take advantage of them. They don't learn what life's about. If all you do is cover for their inadequacies at home, at school, on the baseball field. You watch these parents sometimes, just see it on YouTube, where the kids get into a little tiff, and next thing you know, the stand's empty of parents on both sides, and now the parents sometimes are in fisticuffs, basketball courts, track, hockey rinks. We do it with homework or just social adjustment. And what are these kids learning about life? Well, they're learning that all things are flexible if you have the right parents, if you have the right coach, the right trainer, the right political party, and it'll all get worked out. Somebody else will fight your battle for you, or the government will come to your rescue because you don't have any choices here. But what these children do not learn is character. Character is a quality forged in failure, not victory. We're watching that play out right now in Washington, D.C. What are the Democrats doing? Well, they're seeking to undo the last election. That's immature. They have now trotted out about a half a dozen issues they hoped would be killers. None of them have worked. Have they learned anything? No. They're counting on this steady drumbeat to weaken Trump's effectiveness. For what purpose? So they will have the power. Now, they could demonstrate how their ideas, their policies are superior, but instead they have taken the last 2 or 3 years to do nothing more than blacken the Republican eye with half-truths and innuendo, things that are undone as soon as the daylight hits them. They're hoping to weaken Trump and the Republicans for the next election. So how's that working out? Well, just about every week the reports are highlighting the growing strength of the Republican Party. as more and more Americans, many of them former Democrats, are switching. Trump rallies continue to attract more people than the venues can handle, and Democrats are switching black, white, and Hispanic. The media doesn't reflect all of this except where they must. Currently, their man-on-the-street interviews are shocking. Not for me, for them. They can't believe their ears. Minority groups and even former Democrats are becoming Trump supporters. Why? Well, because people tend to know truth when they hear it. And people who have not worked in years are finding jobs. Unemployment is now at 3%. And experts say that's about as low as it can go, given the number of people who cannot work. At the same time, wages are up. People are finding self-respect and the ability to have the things they need and the things they want without borrowing. Why? Well, largely because biblical principles are being implemented. I don't mean those having to do with salvation, but the biblical principles of economics, of governance, of laws, and more. What's going on at our southern border is an unlawful, immoral event because it is unlawful to enter a country without invitation or permission. And if it is unlawful, it's immoral. Only criminals do this sort of thing. It's also immoral to let people live in unsafe conditions where large rats live in and around your trash cans spreading disease. It is immoral to let people live on the streets, defecating on those streets. It is immoral to deliberately create situations that invite forest fires. You've seen the fires out in California, haven't you? Are you counting? In the last 20 years, how many of these have we had? A bunch. And the experts tell us that they all come from, pretty much the big ones, all come from the same source. They come from Bill Clinton. What? What's Bill Clinton got to do with it? It was during the Bill Clinton era that they stopped the forest rangers from clearing the debris off the floor. They used to do controlled burns to get rid of all of the trash and junk that falls out of trees and clear it all out. Why? To prevent forest fires. But for some reason, we had this idea, back to nature, let it all die. No, you can't touch that. It's sort of like global warming. No, you can't touch it. We have to protect the environment. So now, as all these leaves and pine needles and all this trees fall, all this thing piles up, sometimes 2, 3, 4, 5 feet thick on the floor of the forest. Deadness, just sitting there dying, attracting all sorts of critters, and some of it close to houses. And then one day something happens, an electric line snaps and falls down, and there's a big spark, huge spark, starts a fire. You just saw what happened when a fire was started just that way. That's what liberals do to you. And it's immoral. I think it probably was ignorant. They didn't know the difference. But the Forest Service knew. Why didn't they tell them? I'm sure they did. But you see, the politicians know better. It's immoral to deliberately support people who are conflating gender, then open the libraries and even schools to drag queens who read stories to preschoolers, first graders, and they do it in makeup and costume. It's immoral to deliberately deflate the economy with policies that weaken the currency, in our case, the dollar. It's immoral to send our troops to defend people who hate us and do everything they can to undermine what we stand for. It is immoral to be required to give more money to global aid than other member countries, percentage-wise. It is immoral for those member nations to then denounce us, impugn us for doing so. It is immoral for our sitting president to bow before the enemy heads of state, regardless of the reason. If you are required to do so, given your religious connections, how did you get elected to an enemy state or to an enemy state? And if you did, why are you not showing us respect over them? The answers are obvious, but they're never going to be answered in the mainstream media, nor by Democrat leaders. And the list is long. We could go on. But the illustrations and the reasons behind them speak of one thing. We are infiltrated by a huge cadre of God-hating, that's primary, freedom-hating elected officials. They like freedom for themselves, but they don't want it for you. Elected by people who are either part of the problem or are completely ignorant of what's really going on. Ignorant because they've been educated in our state schools and exposed to the popular media outlets online and on television. Outlets that just spew this nonsense. And all of this points to the soon return of the Lord Jesus Christ. The Bible says when they say peace and safety, then will the end come. The Apostle Paul, speaking of the end times, 1 Thessalonians chapter 5, said, "But of the times and the seasons, brethren, you have no need that I write unto you. For yourselves know perfectly that the day of the Lord so cometh as a thief in the night." Sneaks up on you. You will not see it coming. "But ye, brethren, are not in darkness, that that day should overtake you as a thief." Christians will be waiting for it. "You are all the children of light and the children of the day. We're not of the night nor of darkness. Therefore, let us, those of us who know what's going on, not sleep as others do. But let us watch and be sober, alert. For they that sleep, sleep in the night, and they that be drunken are drunken in the night. But let us who are of the day be sober, putting on the breastplate of faith and love, and for a helmet, the hope of salvation." Words written 2,000 years ago that ring true today as we see this age coming to an ignoble conclusion. Watch the news and tell me I'm wrong.